Welcome back to another episode of Faith First Leader. I am your host, Susan Fleming, and today we're talking about survival mechanisms and what they look like in everyday life. Now, I'm sure you've heard of three limbic system survival mechanisms: fight, flight, or freeze. And you typically hear these talked about when someone is referring to a high stress response or a perceived danger. And we've been told that this is how the body reacts, but this isn't the full story. Did you know there are actually six survival mechanisms operated by the limbic system? It is fight, flight, freeze, faint, feed, or fornicate. So maybe not what you were expecting to hear. Let's start with fornicate because I'm sure that got your attention. Now, I do want to say that this is not sticking to the literal definition of having sex outside of marriage. At the most basic level, this is about procreation and continuing the survival of the human race. It could also be signaled to keep someone safe or help someone survive, like in sex trafficking situations or prostitution situations. But sometimes the brain will signals sex or fornicate when the body isn't actually in danger. When there is previous trauma, signals can be intensified and send inaccurate information. And we see this indicated in situations where someone has learned to use flirtation, for example, as a manipulation to get needs met, or someone engaging in high risk sexual situations in an effort to feel better or just feel something. And so feed presents itself in eating disorders or when someone uses food to feel better in some way. This can look like pattern indulgence, binge eating, or starving oneself. This also covers addictions, self-harming behaviors, maybe excessively working out, excessively working, these things we see in the day to day that we don't necessarily automatically think, oh, that's a survival mechanism or that's a trauma response. So any behavior that's attempting to fill an emptiness would fall under this feed response being triggered, and it becomes a coping mechanism instead of a survival response. Faint can be literal fainting or simply excessive sleeping behaviors after an emotionally charged event. For example, someone who stays angry to the point of exhaustion. This feeds depressive symptoms because your body is trying to recover and heal itself. The body naturally heals in REM sleep, but you can't stay there that long. And so we see this faint response in sleeping patterns. Now, fight, flight, or freeze, you've probably heard enough about. I don't need to go into how those operate. But the common theme in all six of these responses is that they all contribute to survival. Now, again, when there's trauma, the signal is intensified when it doesn't need to be. And these responses actually become coping mechanisms. And so, why am I sharing this with you today? Well, number one, if you notice these responses in yourself or someone else, then respond as God does. Give grace instead of condemnation. Number two, if you notice these responses in yourself, seek help before it gets worse. Ask Holy Spirit to reveal the patterns and reveal the solutions. I believe that can look many different ways. Most of us are quick to say, no, that's not me. I've never experienced trauma. And when we do this, we are automatically shutting down the opportunity for insight into our behavior patterns. Now, trauma doesn't always look like what you think. It can come from harsh words, moving at a young age, getting married, starting a new job, losing a job, any number of situations that involve transition or change. And the symptoms may not be to the degree of needing therapy, but that doesn't mean they don't need intervention. So we have what are called big T traumas, and then we have little t traumas. And so the big T traumas are what most people are familiar with. And that's typically why they say, no, that's not me. That hasn't happened to me. So examples of this include situations that are more acute, more intense, usually related to life threatening events. This can be natural disasters, violent crimes, sexual assault, school shootings, car accidents, the death of a loved one. Those big T traumas cause severe distress and interfere with daily functioning. And again, that's why a lot of people will say, no, I haven't experienced trauma. But you may have a little t trauma. These small traumas are less intense and usually don't involve anything that's life threatening. They're more associated with chronic stressors or relational stress that can build up over time and cause significant distress. And so, examples of this could be a breakup, a divorce, the death of a pet, losing a job, getting a job. Like I said, um, it doesn't have to be negative things that cause trauma, because a lot of time the trauma just comes from transition. And so we don't think about, oh, I'm planning a wedding and that could be traumatic, or moving multiple times, right? These can have negative effects on our mental health and our physical health. And so just take a moment today and start thinking about, what are some of the things in my life that have maybe caused some trauma? If any of these responses sound familiar, or maybe even to a lesser degree, there could be something going on under the surface that needs to be addressed. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is this something you already knew about? Leave me a comment. Um, if you haven't yet subscribed, do that. Share it with someone. You want to get these future notifications of when I'm going live again or when something has been posted. And so, again, just leaving me a comment, let me know, was this helpful to you? And I'll see you next time. Blessings.